I stood in the middle of the terminal, gripping my bag strap like it was the only thing holding me together. My mother tilted her head, her voice quiet but sharp enough to slice right through my dignity. "Flights are $1,450 each," she said. "If you cannot afford it, stay behind." Before I could swallow the lump in my throat, my phone vibrated with a bank notification. $9,540. The number hit me like a physical blow. My name is Addison Perry, and standing in the center of the bustling departure hall at Charleston International Airport, I looked less like a member of the Perry family and more like a smudge on a camera lens that they were desperate to wipe away. The air conditioning in the terminal was humming, a low industrial drone that usually calmed me, but today it felt thin and insufficient against the rising heat of my own humiliation. Around us, travelers rushed with the frenetic energy of people late for vacations they had overpaid for. But my family stood in a practiced static bubble of calm, occupying the space as if they had rented the square footage of the floor itself. I adjusted the strap of my bag, a canvas tote that had seen better years, let alone days. It dug into my shoulder, heavy with the practical things I always carry because no one else ever did: painkillers, backup chargers, printed itineraries, and wet wipes. I was wearing a heather gray coat that I had bought secondhand 3 winters ago, and a pair of sneakers that had lost their bright white sheen months ago. In contrast, my sister Sloane looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine spread titled The Modern Matriarch. Sloane was the center of gravity. She was 6 months pregnant, glowing with that ethereal, scientifically engineered radiance that comes from expensive facials and zero financial stress. She wore a flowing cream-colored maxi dress that cost more than my car insurance for the year, draped perfectly over her baby bump. Her husband, Brent, stood beside her, looking like a catalog model for casual affluence in his linen blazer, tapping away on his phone. And then there was my mother, Marjorie. Marjorie was not just standing, she was directing. She circled Sloane like a hawk, adjusting a nest, her hands fluttering to fix a stray lock of hair, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on Sloane's shoulder. Marjorie was dressed for travel, which in her vocabulary meant cashmere, silk, and a pair of sunglasses perched on her head that signaled she was ready for the paparazzi that would never come. Chin up. "Sloane, the lighting is terrible in here. You look washed out," Marjorie murmured, though her voice carried that distinct sharp frequency that only dogs and disappointing daughters could hear clearly. She snapped a photo with her phone, frowned, and adjusted the angle. "There. Much better. We need to document the start of the journey properly." I stood 3 feet away, just outside the frame. Always just outside the frame. This trip was supposed to be the baby moon, a final luxurious excursion to Maui before the baby arrived. It was also, according to Marjorie, a family bonding experience, which usually meant they needed someone to handle the logistics while they drank mimosas. I had spent the last 2 weeks coordinating the dog sitter for Marjorie, confirming the limo service, and double-checking the weather patterns over the Pacific. "Addison," Marjorie said. She did not look at me. She was busy zooming in on the photo she had just taken of Sloane. "Do not slouch. It makes you look defeated." "I am not slouching, Mom," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "I was just asking if we are ready to check in. The line for the kiosks is getting long." Marjorie finally turned to me. Her gaze swept down my gray coat, paused at my scuffed sneakers, and returned to my face with a look of mild indigestion. We were surrounded by people Sloane's friends, a couple named Jessica and Todd, who had decided to join the trip last minute because they adored Hawaii, and a few distant cousins who were eager to attach themselves to the Perry brand. "Check in," Marjorie repeated, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. She looked around at the group, ensuring she had an audience. Jessica was watching. Todd was watching. Brent had looked up from his phone. "Addison, Darling, we are flying business class. There is no line for us. She paused for effect. The silence stretched thin and taut. However, she continued, her voice dropping to a register that was meant to sound polite, but felt like a razor blade sliding between my ribs. I was reviewing the final budget this morning. The upgrades were significant. Flights are $1,450 each. I blinked. I knew how much the flights were. I had looked them up weeks ago when she first proposed the idea, although back then she had mentioned looking for economy deals. Okay, I said, confusion knitting my brow. So Marjorie took a step closer to me, invading my personal space with the scent of Chanel No. 5 in judgment. So I assumed you had made your own arrangements. Surely you did not expect us to cover a ticket of that magnitude for you. You know how tight things are with the baby coming. The air left my lungs. Mom, you told me to be here at 10 o'clock. You said the tickets were booked. I said our tickets were booked. She corrected, her eyes wide with fig-net innocence. I assumed you would buy your own if you wanted to come. But really? Addison. $1,450. We both know that is outside your capabilities. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. Jessica and Todd were exchanging awkward glances, but they were not looking away. They were watching the car crash. Sloane let out a small tinkling laugh, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. Oh, Mom, stop it, Sloane giggled, though her eyes were cold. You are embarrassing her. I am being practical, Marjorie said, turning back to the group, but keeping her voice loud enough for the passing travelers to hear. Addison, if you cannot afford it, stay behind. It is not a tragedy. Someone needs to be in the state in case of an emergency. And honestly, you would probably be happier here. She gestured vaguely at my outfit. You do not exactly scream resort wear, do you? I gripped my bag tighter. My knuckles were white. So, I am not going. Not unless you have $1,450 to hand over to the agent right now, Marjorie said dismissively. Then she turned to Todd and Jessica, her face brightening instantly into a mask of charm. But you two? You are all set. I handled everything. Treat on us for being such good friends to Sloane. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. She was paying for Sloane's friends. She was paying for the cousins. But for her own daughter. The one who had driven her to the dermatologist last week. The one who had balanced her checkbook 3 times this year. She had nothing but a bill I could not pay. Actually, Marjorie added as if an afterthought struck her. She looked at the pile of luggage. 6 massive hard-shell suitcases for Sloane alone. Since you are here, Addison, be a dear. And help Brent get these bags over to the counter. You know how his back gets. Consider it a contribution. You might not be flying, but you can still be useful like a baggage handler. It suits you. Sloane laughed again. Mom, that is terrible. But she did not stop laughing. She took Brent's arm. Come on, babe. Let's get to the lounge. I need sparkling water. Go ahead. Darling, Marjorie said, waving them off. I will be right there. I just need to finish this transaction. The group began to move. They flowed away from me like water around a rock. Sloane. Brent. The friends. Cousins. They turned their backs, dragging their expensive luggage on silent wheels toward the exclusive carpet of the business class check-in. I was left standing alone on the cold terrazzo floor. People were staring. I could feel their eyes pitying, amused, curious. A woman with a toddler looked at me and quickly looked away when our eyes met. I stood there frozen, the echo of baggage handler bouncing around my skull. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab one of those heavy suitcases and hurl it through the glass window. But I didn't. I did what I had done for 32 years. I swallowed it. I let the shame settle in my stomach like a stone. I turned to leave. If I walked fast enough, I could get to the parking lot before the tears actually fell. I took one step. Then two. And then I saw her. Marjorie was still standing near the kiosk, not following the group yet. She was holding her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with a speed and dexterity that belied her age. She wasn't taking photos. She was typing, entering data. She had a look of intense concentration, the tip of her tongue poking out between her lips. I paused. Why was she lingering? Then my pocket buzzed. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration against my hip. I ignored it. I took another step. It buzzed again and again, a triple pulse that I associated with high-priority alerts. I stopped. My hand went to my pocket almost automatically. I pulled out my phone. The screen cracked slightly in the corner. Another thing I couldn't afford to fix. According to them, there was a notification from my bank app. Transaction alert. High value. I unlocked the phone. My fingers trembling slightly. The screen refreshed and the numbers burned themselves into my retinas. Pending transaction. Global Air Travel Services. Amount $9,540. I stared at the number. $9,540. I looked up. Marjorie was hitting confirm on her screen. She slipped her phone into her designer bag, smoothed her silk scarf, and turned to trot after Sloane and the others. A satisfied bounce in her step. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The noise of the airport, the announcements, the crying babies, the rolling wheels. All of it dropped away into a sudden vacuum-sealed silence. My mother had just told me to my face in front of an audience that flights were $1,450, and that if I could not afford it, I had to stay behind. She had shamed me for being poor. She had mocked me for being nothing more than help. And then 30 seconds later, she had charged the entire group's airfare to my credit card. She had paid for herself, for Sloane, for Brent, for Jessica, and for Todd using my money. My brain tried to process the logic. She must have had my card information saved on her browser autofill. I remembered vaguely years ago giving her the numbers when she was stranded in Chicago and needed an emergency hotel room. I had never changed the card. I had never revoked the authorization because foolishly I thought I could trust my mother with my financial safety. She didn't just exclude me. She stole from me to fund the exclusion. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me to pay for the privilege of being left behind. I looked at the retreating figure of my mother. She was laughing now, catching up to Sloane, reaching out to touch Sloane's arm. They looked so happy, so rich, so unburdened. $9,540. That was my savings. That was the operational capital for the next quarter. That was everything I had liquefied just this morning for a transfer I needed to make tomorrow. A normal person would have run after them. A normal person would have shouted, caused a scene, grabbed Marjorie by her cashmere shoulders, and demanded an explanation. A normal daughter would have cried. But I didn't cry. Something inside my chest, something that had been strained and fraying for decades, finally snapped. But it wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of a heavy steel door sliding shut and the tumblers of a lock falling into place. Click. The sadness evaporated. The humiliation evaporated. In their place, a cold crystalline clarity washed over me. It was a temperature drop so sudden I almost shivered. I looked at the notification one last time. Pending. Okay. I whispered. My voice was steady. It sounded like a stranger's voice. I did not follow them to the business class check-in. I did not run to the gate to beg. I did not call out Mom. Instead, I turned my back on the terminal. I turned my back on the polished floors and the duty-free shops in the promise of Maui. I began to walk in the opposite direction. I walked past the baggage claim, Past the confused families reuniting and out the automatic sliding doors into the humid Charleston air. But I didn't go to the parking garage where my beat-up sedan was waiting. Turned right, walking along the pedestrian path that led away from the passenger terminals, toward the chain-link fences and the corrugated metal structures that most people ignored. I walked toward the cargo hangars to my family. The cargo area was a place for things that were unseen, dirty, and industrial. It was a place for the help. They thought I was walking away in shame to hide in my car, or maybe to go sit on a curb and weep. They had no idea. I wasn't walking away from the fight. I was walking toward my office. Because while Marjorie Perry knew how to spend $9,540 in 10 seconds, she had absolutely no idea that the baggage handler she just mocked owned the logistics firm that operated out of the building she was currently flying over. I adjusted my bag, lifted my chin, and walked faster. The sting of the transaction was still fading from my screen, but the sting in my heart was gone, replaced by a blueprint. They wanted me to stay behind, fine. I would stay behind, and from down here I was going to pull the sky down on top of them. The heat coming off the tarmac was different from the air in the terminal. It was thick, smelling of jet fuel and burnt rubber, a scent that most people found noxious, but one that I had come to associate with clarity. As I walked along the service road, the noise of the departing planes was deafening, a physical roar that vibrated in my chest, drowning out the lingering echo of my mother's voice. If you cannot afford it, stay behind. The sentence replayed in my mind, not as a fresh wound, but as a refrain I had been hearing in different variations for my entire life. This was not a sudden betrayal. It was simply the loudest version of a song they had been singing since I was a child. I looked down at my sneakers scuffing against the asphalt. They were worn, yet practical. My mother saw them and saw failure. She saw a lack of ambition. What she didn't see was that I walked this path every single day. And you do not wear Louis Vuitton to walk through a freight zone. But then again, Marjorie Perry only saw what she wanted to see. She curated her reality the same way she curated her living room. Everything had to be aesthetically pleasing, expensive, and centered around Sloan. I remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, a fact that should have mattered. I had spent weeks writing my speech, practicing it in the mirror until I could deliver it without shaking. On the morning of the ceremony, Sloan had a crisis. I believe it was a bad reaction to a spray tan she had turned a shade of orange that she deemed social suicide. Marjorie spent 3 hours in the bathroom with her, scrubbing her skin with lemon juice and baking soda, while my father paced the hallway, wringing his hands. By the time they decided Sloan was presentable enough to leave the house, they had missed my speech. They arrived just as the ceremony ended, waving from the back row as I walked off the stage, my diploma already in hand. We made it for the photos, darling, Marjorie had chirped afterward, pulling me into a side hug that was careful not to wrinkle her dress. And really, speeches are so boring. You didn't miss much. I learned then that my achievements were only relevant if they could be framed on a mantelpiece, and even then, only if they didn't overshadow Sloan's latest drama. I became the background noise. I was the reliable hum of the refrigerator that you only notice when it stops working. Sloan was the chandelier, fragile, expensive, and demanding all the light. It was almost funny, walking toward the rusted, corrugated metal of the freight warehouses, thinking about how successful I had been at maintaining their delusion. To my family, I was Addison the struggler. I was Addison who did freelance computer things and odd administrative jobs. I kept my job description vague on purpose. I told them I did data entry. I told them I helped organize files for small businesses. I made myself sound boring and barely solvent because I learned very early on that in the Perry family, money was not a resource. It was a weapon. If they knew I had it, they would weaponize it against me. Or worse, they would feel entitled to it. They thought I was poor because I didn't wear my bank account on my wrist. They thought I was struggling because I drove a 5-year-old sedan instead of leasing a new Rover every 2 years. But the irony was sharp enough to cut. I wasn't just the family scapegoat. I was the family bank. I thought about the emergencies over the last decade. The time Sloane's credit card was maxed out right before her engagement party, threatening to decline the caterer. I had transferred $4,000 to her account labeled gift. She never said thank you. She just assumed the universe had corrected itself. Or the time my father Elliot forgot to pay the premium on his life insurance policy 3 months in a row. I paid it. I paid the annual dues for Marjorie's country club membership 2 years ago, when she cried about a cash flow issue due to some bad stock advice. I kept the lights on in the Perry showroom, and they thanked me by treating me like the janitor. I reached the perimeter fence of the cargo area. There was a security gate here. Unmanned but heavily monitored. I didn't need to buzz in. I pulled a plain gray lanyard from my pocket, the kind that looked like it belonged to a low-level warehouse clerk, and tapped it against the reader. Beep. The light turned green. The heavy steel turnstile unlocked with a satisfying clunk. I stepped through into the domain of the unseen. Ahead of me stood Building 4B. To the casual observer. To my mother. To the wealthy tourists flying overhead in first class. It looked like a derelict hangar. The paint was peeling in strategic strips. The signage was faded, reading freight services in letters that looked like they hadn't been touched since 1995. It was ugly. It was industrial. It was perfect. I walked up to the side door, which looked like a heavy rusted slab of metal. It was actually reinforced ballistic steel. I placed my palm on the scanner disguised as a generic keypad. A beam of red light scanned my retina. Welcome, Director Perry. The automated voice was soft, cool, and infinitely more welcoming than my own mother. The door hissed open and I stepped out of the humidity and into the climate-controlled sanctuary of North Glass Travel Systems. The interior was a stark contrast to the exterior. It was a hive of silent high-tech efficiency. Rows of servers hummed behind glass walls. Large monitors displayed global flight paths, real-time weather patterns, and currency fluctuation graphs. This wasn't a warehouse. This was the nerve center of one of the most efficient corporate travel logistics firms on the East Coast. I wasn't a freelancer. I was the founder. I had built North Glass 10 years ago. Realizing that corporate travel was a nightmare of inefficiencies, companies lost millions on bad routing, missed connections, and unused points. I wrote an algorithm that predicted price drops and optimized multi-leg journeys for large delegations. We didn't deal with tourists. We dealt with Fortune 500 companies moving executives across the globe. We handled the logistics that kept the economy moving. And we did it from a building that looked like it was about to be condemned. I walked past the main operations floor. My staff, a small but elite team of analysts and logistics experts, were glued to their screens. A few looked up and nodded. They respected me. They didn't care about my shoes. They cared about my code. Afternoon. Addison. One of my senior analysts, David, called out. You're back early. Thought you were going to Hawaii. Change of plans. I said. My voice steady. Hawaii is too expensive. David laughed, thinking it was a joke. I kept walking until I reached my office at the back, a glass-walled enclosure that overlooked the server room. I shut the door, threw my bag on the sleek black desk, and sat down in my ergonomic chair. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of ozone and filtered air. This was my kingdom. Here I was a queen. And yet, 5 miles away at Gate C4, I was a peasant. I pulled my phone out again. The notification was still there. Pending transaction. $9,540. I swiped to open the banking app. I needed to see the details. I needed to understand exactly how much they despised me. I tapped on the transaction because I owned a travel company. I could read the metadata of a transaction better than anyone. I recognized the merchant code. It wasn't just a generic airline charge. It was processed through a high-end travel concierge service, the kind that added a 20% markup for the privilege of booking over the phone. I expanded the details. For passengers, round trip, Charleston to Maui, class premium business, lie flat, add-on, priority boarding, extra baggage allowance, maximum, comprehensive travel insurance, cancel for any reason. My jaw tightened. They hadn't just bought tickets. They had bought the most expensive, flexible, luxurious tickets possible. Marjorie had selected the cancel for any reason insurance. That was the kicker. That was the detail that made my blood run cold. She spent an extra $800 on insurance just in case she decided not to go, protecting her comfort with my money while leaving me on the curb. And the total $9,540. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. How did this happen? How did she have the access? I closed my eyes, forcing my memory back. It was 4 years ago. Marjorie was in Paris. She had called me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Hysterical. Her wallet had been stolen or lost. She never clarified, and the hotel was threatening to kick her out. She needed a card on file immediately. I was half asleep. I was worried. I was the beautiful daughter. I gave her the number of my primary personal credit card, the one with the high limit that I used for business liquidity before I incorporated. I told her to use it for the hotel and then destroy the number. You're a lifesaver, Addison. I don't know what I'd do without you. She had cried. I believed her. I believed she was grateful, and because I wanted to trust her, because I desperately wanted to believe that my mother wouldn't exploit me. I never called the bank to generate a new number. I never checked the authorized users list because I assumed she had done what I asked. I was an idiot. A successful, wealthy, intelligent idiot. She must have saved the card. She probably wrote it down in that little leather notebook she carried everywhere. And today, when she decided she wanted to look rich in front of Sloane's friends, she pulled it out. She didn't use her card. She didn't use Brent's card. She used mine. Why? The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just about money. If she used her card, she would have to pay it. If she used Brent's, Sloane would yell at her. But if she used mine, she assumed I wouldn't notice immediately. Or worse, she assumed that if I did notice, I would be too cowed, too shy, too desperate for their approval to say anything. She banked on my silence. She banked on the fact that I had been bailing them out for years without complaint. She thought my silence was weakness. She thought my lack of designer clothes meant a lack of self-respect. They didn't kick me off the flight. I whispered to the empty office. They kicked me out of their dignity, but they decided to keep my wallet in their pocket. It was a profound violation. It was theft wrapped in familial gaslighting. I looked at the screen again. I navigated to the card management section of the app. There it was. Primary card holder Addison Perry. Authorized user Marjorie Perry. Seeing her name there, legally attached to my assets, felt like seeing a parasite on an X-ray. She had been there for 4 years, dormant, waiting for the right moment to feed. And today, she had taken a bite the size of a compact car. I hovered my finger over her name. My heart was pounding. This was it. If I did this, there was no going back. This wasn't just a financial dispute. This was a declaration of war. If I cut her off, the illusion of the supportive, quiet daughter would shatter. They would see me. They would hate me. But they already hated me, didn't they? They despised me enough to leave me behind. They disrespected me enough to steal from me. I thought about Marjorie's face when she told me to stay behind. I thought about the way she looked at Sloane with adoration. I thought about the way she looked at me with calculation. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was a resource, and resources don't have feelings. Resources are just there to be used until they run dry. Well, the well just ran dry. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't feel the sting of the rejection. I felt the cold, hard resolve of a CEO making a necessary budget cut. Goodbye? Mom? I said softly. I tapped the screen. Remove authorized user. Are you sure? This will immediately deactivate the user's card and decline any pending transactions associated with their unique token. I didn't hesitate. I didn't blink. I pressed confirm. The app loaded for a second. A spinning circle of doom. Then a green check mark appeared. Authorized user removed. I sat back, letting the breath hiss out of my lungs. It was done. The cord was cut. But I wasn't finished. Removing her was just the first step. The money was still pending. The plane was still waiting. And my family was still sitting in the lounge drinking champagne they thought I was paying for. I picked up the desk phone. The secure line. I dialed the direct number for the fraud department of my bank, a number I had on speed dial because I managed millions of dollars in corporate travel. I didn't need to wait on hold. Platinum desk. This is Sarah. The voice answered instantly. Sarah. This is Addison Perry, I said. My voice dropping into the flat authoritative tone I used when a negotiation was going south. Security code Alpha 9 Victor. I need to report a series of unauthorized transactions on my personal account, and I need to stop a payment that is currently in the pending status. It involves a travel agency. Perry, Sarah said, typing in the background. I see the charge here. $9,540. Global Air Travel Services. Do you want to dispute this? I don't just want to dispute it, I said, looking out through the glass wall at the busy floor of my company at the empire I had built while they were busy buying shoes. I want to scorch the earth it stands on. I paused, watching the seconds tick by on the digital clock on my wall. Boarding for the Maui flight would start in 40 minutes. Flag it as fraud. I commanded. Kill the authorization and Sarah make sure the decline code is specific. I want the merchant to know the card holder reported it as stolen. Done, Sarah said. Anything else? Yeah, I said, reaching for the thick binder on my shelf labeled Family Ledger. Prepare to freeze everything. We are going to have a very busy afternoon. I hung up the phone. The silence in the office was absolute. It was the silence before a storm. I turned my chair toward the window, looking out toward the runway where the silver jets were lining up, gleaming in the sun. Somewhere out there, Marjorie was probably toasting to her cleverness. She thought she had left me behind. She was wrong. I was just moving to the control tower. The phone in my hand felt less like a communication device and more like a surgical instrument. I was not manic. I was not hyperventilating. The rage that had threatened to consume me in the terminal had cooled into a focused icy precision. I was back in my element now. This was not a family dispute anymore. This was a containment protocol for a security breach. Sarah, I said, my voice crisp, cutting through the static of the line. Let us proceed with the containment. I need you to isolate the sub-account ending in 4022. That is the card currently in Marjorie Perry's physical possession. I have the account pulled up. Perry, Sarah replied, her tone matching my urgency. I see the pending charge for Global Air Travel Systems. It is currently in the authorization phase. Do not let it capture. I commanded. I am formally declaring that transaction unauthorized. I want you to place a merchant block on Global Air specifically for that card token. If the payment processor attempts to finalize the settlement batch, I want it to bounce back with a stolen card decline code. Can you confirm that? Can, Sarah said. I could hear the rapid-fire clicking of her keyboard. I am placing the block now. I am also revoking the digital token associated with that card number. So even if they try to manually key it in again, the system will recognize the token has been burned, The authorization hold is still showing on your available credit, but the money will not leave the bank. Good, I said, watching the flight data on my office monitors. Now issue a new primary account number for me. Digital issue only for now. Send it to my secure wallet. I need to maintain my own liquidity. But for the physical card ending in 4022, kill it. Turn it into a piece of plastic scrap. Card is deactivated. Sarah confirmed. Perry, I see a few other recurring charges scheduled to hit that card in the next 48 hours. A lease payment for a Range Rover and a membership fee for the Charleston Harbor Club. Do you want to move those to the new account? I paused. The Charleston Harbor Club. That was where Marjorie held court. That was where she took her friends to drink gin fizzes and complained about how hard it was to find good help. And the Range Rover, that was the car she needed for her image. The one I had co-signed for because she claimed her credit score was temporarily dinged by a clerical error. No, I said, and the word tasted like iron. Do not move them. Let them decline. Understood. Anything else? That is all. Sarah, flag the account for high-risk monitoring. If anyone calls claiming to be me or my mother to reactivate it. The passphrase is scorched earth. Do not accept anything else. Understood. Good luck. Perry. I hung up, but I did not set the phone down. The bank was the shield, but I needed a sword. I needed to cut the line at the source. I dialed the number for Global Air Travel Systems. I knew this agency. They were boutique, overpriced, and specialized in catering to people who thought opening a web page was manual labor. They also panicked easily when their commission was threatened. Global Air. This is Timothy speaking. How may I assist your journey today? The voice was oily and eager. Timothy. This is Addison Perry, I said. I am the card holder for a transaction that was processed through your system 12 minutes ago. Booking reference likely under the name Sloan Maddox or Marjorie Perry. Timothy brightened the Maui group. Wonderful itinerary. I just sent the confirmation emails. Is there a problem? Did we need to add another passenger? No. Timothy. We need to subtract 4. I said you need to void that transaction immediately. There was a pause. I beg your pardon. The tickets have been issued. The policy for this fare class. I know the policy. I interrupted. I also know the chargeback laws. That transaction was made with a stolen credit card instrument. I have already flagged it with my bank's fraud department. If you attempt to settle that batch tonight, you are going to get hit with a chargeback fee, a fraud investigation, and I will personally report your agency to the Better Business Bureau and the Airline Reporting Corporation for processing a high V-value transaction without verifying the cardholder's ID. Wait. Timothy stammered, his oily veneer cracking. Mrs. Perry, the mother. She had the card. She said she is not the card holder. I am. I said, and I am telling you the money is gone. You can either void the ticket stock right now and save yourself the administrative nightmare, or you can explain to your boss why you lost 10 grand and got the agency flagged. You have exactly 3 minutes before the airline system locks the manifest. I could hear him breathing hard. He was doing the math. I will void it, he whispered. I am canceling the PNRs now. The tickets will be invalid upon scanning. Thank you. Timothy. I said. Have a lovely day. I ended the call. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs. It was done. The trap was set, but I wasn't finished. The anger was a fuel source, and I had a lot of mileage left to burn. I spun my chair around and rolled over to the filing cabinet behind my desk. It was locked naturally. I keyed in the code and pulled out the bottom drawer. There, nestled between corporate tax returns and vendor contracts, was a thick black binder. The spine was labeled simply Family. I pulled it out and slammed it onto my desk. It made a heavy, satisfying thud. I opened it. This was my ledger. This was the receipt of my stupidity. For years, I had tracked every dollar I spent on them. Not because I planned to ask for it back. I had long ago accepted that money given to Marjorie or Sloane was a donation to a black hole. But because I needed to know the cost of their love. I needed to quantify exactly how much it cost to be tolerated. I flipped to the summary page. The numbers were staggering. In the last fiscal year alone, I had covered $24,000 in incidental expenses. I ran my finger down the list of active autopays linked to my accounts. Sloane's car insurance, $210 a month. Marjorie's cell phone plan, including international roaming, she never turned off, $340 a month. Storage unit rental for Sloane's vintage furniture collection, which was just junk she refused to throw away, $180 a month. Streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Disney Plus. All premium tiers, $85 a month. It was a slow bleed. A drip. Drip. Drip of my hard-earned capital feeding their comfort while they mocked my cheap clothes. But then my eyes caught something else. I grabbed the printed receipt that I had downloaded from the bank app before blocking the card. The detailed breakdown of the $9,540 charge. I had assumed the cost was high because of the last-minute booking in the business class seats. But looking at the passenger manifest on the receipt, the math didn't add up for just 3 people. Passenger 1. Sloane Maddox. Passenger 2. Brent Maddox. Passenger 3. Marjorie Perry. I scanned down. Passenger 4. Jessica Tate. Passenger 5. Todd Tate. I stopped. I blinked. Sure that I was misreading the text. Jessica and Todd. The friends. The couple standing next to Sloane at the airport. The ones who had laughed awkwardly when Marjorie told me to stay behind. My mother had not just charged the family's tickets to me. She had charged tickets for Sloane's friends. She was treating strangers to a Hawaiian vacation using my money, while simultaneously telling me I was too poor to go. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, dark and jagged. It was absurd. It was almost impressive in its cruelty. They were drinking champagne in the lounge, celebrating a free trip, likely toasting to Marjorie's generosity, while I was footing the bill for people I didn't even know. That was it. That was the final grain of sand that tipped the scale from retaliation to total war. I turned back to my computer. I didn't just want to stop the flight. I wanted to stop everything. I logged into my personal bill pay portal. Select all. I looked at the list. The car payments. The insurance. The gym memberships. The emergency loan repayment plan I had set up for Brent when he gambled away their mortgage money 2 years ago. A loan they had never paid a cent toward, leaving me to cover the monthly installments to keep the bank off their backs. I clicked Cancel Recurring Payments. Warning. This may result in late fees, service interruption, or repossession of assets. Do you wish to proceed? Let them repossess it all, I muttered. Clicked Yes. I watched the screen refresh. Status inactive. Status inactive. Status inactive. It felt like I was walking through a house and turning off the lights room by room, plunging them into the darkness they deserved. But I needed more ammunition if they were going to come for me. And they would screaming and crying. I needed to be bulletproof. I opened the folder on my drive labeled Bank Statements. I selected the last 12 months of data. I hit Print. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life. It began to spit out page after page of evidence. Every time they ate sushi on my dime. Every time Marjorie filled her tank with premium gas on my card. Every time Sloane bought essential baby clothes that were actually designer handbags. I grabbed a red marker from my desk cup. As the pages came out, I started circling. $400. Sushi Nakazawa. $1,200. Sec. Fifth Avenue. $600. Dermap Spa. I was building a dossier when they came back from the airport, furious and accusing me of ruining their trip. I wasn't going to argue with feelings. I was going to argue with forensic accounting. I picked up the internal line to my finance department. "This is Addison," I said when the CFO, a man named Marcus, who had been with me since the garage days, answered. "Hey boss. What's up, Marcus? I need you to institute a new protocol effective immediately. Any invoice, expense report, or reimbursement request that contains the last name Perry or Maddox needs to be flagged for my personal manual approval. I don't care if it is for a paperclip. Nothing gets paid automatically." Marcus paused. He knew my family situation vaguely, knew they were complicated, but he had never heard me sound like this. Everything, even the legacy stipends, especially the legacy stipends. I said, "Cut them. If they want money, they can submit a W-9 and do some actual work." "Got it," Marcus said, his voice serious. "I will lock it down." I hung up. The printer finished its job. I took the stack of warm paper, organized it neatly, and clamped it into a fresh file folder. I wrote the receipt on the front in bold black letters. I looked at my cell phone. It was sitting on the desk, face up. It hadn't rung yet. That meant they were still in the lounge, still happy, still oblivious. They were probably finishing their drinks, gathering their bags, getting ready to head to the gate. I could call them. I could warn them. I could text Marjorie and say, "I can let the tickets. Don't go to the gate." It would save them the public embarrassment. It would be the decent thing to do. I looked at the notifications on my screen. No missed calls. No texts asking if I was okay. No apology for leaving me behind. They didn't care if I was humiliated. Why should I care if they were? I reached out and held the power button on my phone. Slide to power off. I slid my thumb across the screen. The device went black. Silence. I turned my attention back to the large monitor on my wall, the one displaying the live departure board for Charleston International Airport. I found their flight UA 492 to San Francisco. Connection to Maui. The status light next to the flight number blinked from yellow to green. Status boarding. I checked the time. It was 20 minutes to departure. I zoomed in on the airport's internal operational feed, which my system had access to for logistics monitoring. I could see the passenger count at gate C4. The agents were scanning boarding passes. The line was moving. I imagined the scene. Marjorie pushing her way to the front of the priority lane. Sloane checking her reflection in her phone screen one last time. Brent looking bored. Jessica and Todd smiling that smug free vacation smile. They would hand over their boarding passes. The agent would scan them and the machine would make that terrible loud double beep sound. The sound of rejection. The agent would frown. She would type something. She would try again. Beep beep. Marjorie would get indignant. "Do you know who I am?" The agent would look at the screen and see the words fraud alert. "Do not board. Confiscate ticket." I leaned back in my chair, interlacing my fingers behind my head. The status on the big board flickered. Boarding closing soon. I took a deep breath. It was the sweetest breath of air I had taken in years. "Have a nice flight," I whispered to the empty room. And then I waited for the explosion. From the silent climate-controlled sanctuary of my office, the chaos unfolding at gate C4 was nothing more than a stream of data points turning from green to red. I did not need to be standing on the carpeted floor of the terminal to feel the heat of the moment. I had something better. I had the unfiltered view of the airport's internal logistics grid. On the main monitor, the status of the booking reference, the one Marjorie had so smugly confirmed only 20 minutes ago, flickered. PNR status. Ticket suspended. Reason code. Fraud. Chargeback initiated. Payment status declined. It was a beautiful cascade of digital failure. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. Through the secure access my company had to the terminal's operational camera feed, a privilege granting us oversight of cargo lanes and passenger flow for VIP clients. I pulled up the live feed for Gate C4. The image was grainy, a black and white overhead angle, but the body language was high definition. I saw them. The Maui entourage. They were standing at the head of the priority boarding lane. Marjorie was in front, her posture rigid, her hand thrust out with her phone, likely displaying the digital boarding passes. The gate agent, a woman with infinite patience whose badge number I could look up if I cared to, was shaking her head. I couldn't hear the audio, but I didn't need to. I knew the script. The agent had scanned the first pass. The system had blared its rejection. Marjorie had frowned, assuming it was a glitch. The kind of minor inconvenience that happens to other people, not to Perry's. She tried again. The agent typed something on her keyboard. She looked up. She spoke. Marjorie's arm flew up in a gesture of incredul. The data on my screen updated. Check-in attempted. Access denied. I imagined the sound of Marjorie's voice. It would be rising now. That sharp drill-it-in tone she used when a waiter brought her sparkling water instead of still. This is ridiculous. We are business class. Check it again. Next to her, Sloane was holding her phone up, the ring light case illuminating her face. She was live streaming. I knew she was. She had been talking about this baby moon for weeks, teasing her followers with the promise of exclusive airport content. She was likely framing the shot to include the gate sign, the logo of the airline, and her own perfectly highlighted cheekbones. Suddenly, Sloane's phone lowered. Her head snapped toward our mother. The smile dropped from her face like a mask coming unglued. The line behind them was growing. Business travelers in suits were checking their watches. Families with strollers were shifting their weight. The pressure was building. This was the bottleneck I had engineered. I watched as the gate agent gestured to the side counter. Step aside. Mom. You are blocking the flow. Marjorie did not step aside. Marjorie Perry did not step aside for anyone. She planted her feet. She was arguing. I saw her point a manicured finger at the agent's chest on my desk. My personal phone began to vibrate. Caller ID. Mom. I let it buzz. It danced across the smooth surface of my desk. A frantic little beetle. I watched the screen. The agent was now speaking firmly. She was pointing at the computer. She was telling them the hard truth. The tickets have been voided due to payment fraud. If you want to board this plane, you need to pay now. Marjorie turned to the group. I saw her mouth moving rapidly. She was flustered. Her movements jerky. She dug into her purse. She pulled out the card. My card. The one I had just nuked from orbit. She handed it to the agent with a flourish as if to say, "Here. Fix your mistake." The agent swiped it. I watched the data log on my monitor. Transaction attempt. $9,540. Response hard. Decline. Stolen instrument. The agent handed the card back. She probably said something like, "This card has been reported stolen." Mom. I cannot accept it. Marjorie froze. The color must have drained from her face. Stolen? She had used it for years. She thought she owned it. She turned to Sloane. Sloane looked panicked. She fumbled for her own wallet. She pulled out her card. The one I used to pay off every month. Because Brent is between commissions. The agent swiped Sloane's card. I checked my ledger. I had canceled the automatic payment to Sloane's credit card issuer exactly 14 minutes ago. But more importantly, Sloane's card was maxed out. It had been maxed out since she bought the nursery furniture. She had been relying on me to make the minimum payment today to free up credit for the trip. Transaction attempt $9,540. Response declined. Insufficient funds. Over limit. Sloane threw her hands up. She looked at Brent. Brent, my useless brother-in-law, did the only thing he was good at. He retreated on the camera. I saw him take 2 steps back, pulling his phone out and holding it to his ear, pretending to be on an urgent business call. He was hiding. He had no money. His investments were all smoke and mirrors that I had helped maintain for the sake of the family image. That left the friends, Jessica and Todd. Marjorie turned to them. I could see the desperation in her posture. She was asking them to cover it just for now. She was probably saying, "There is a glitch with the bank. I will wire it to you the second we land." Todd looked at Jessica. Jessica looked at the floor. These were people who liked the idea of wealth. They liked free trips. They did not have $9,000 of liquidity sitting in a checking account to drop on a Tuesday morning for someone else's flight. Todd shook his head. He held up his hands. "Sorry, Marge. We can't." The agent was done. She waved for security. Not to arrest them, but to move them. They were causing a scene. And then it happened. The moment the dam broke, Marjorie didn't just get angry. She got loud. Even on the silent black and white feed, I saw the explosion. She slammed her hand on the counter. She turned to the crowd, to the line of people staring at them, and she screamed. I didn't need the audio feed because my phone lit up with a text from a contact I had in airport security. A favor from an old contract. Text from Mike TSA. "Hey boss. Your mom is at gate C4 screaming that her daughter stole her money. Says the card belongs to Addison Perry. She is making a scene." I smiled. Cold, thin expression. Marjorie had just outed herself. In her rage, in her attempt to play the victim, she had screamed my name. "This is Addison's card. Why is it declined?" She must have done this. She had just announced to Sloane's rich friends, to the business partners, to the entire terminal that the rich matriarch Marjorie Perry was traveling on her baggage handler daughter's dime. She admitted she wasn't paying. She admitted she was using me. Sloane was mortified. On the screen, she was no longer filming. She was covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying. The ugly, heaving sobs of someone whose reality has just been shattered in front of an audience. The bystanders were not looking away anymore. They were holding up their phones. The flash of cameras went off. The Karen at the airport video was being born in real time. Sloane's followers, who had just been watching her live stream, were now seeing the abrupt cut to black and the subsequent meltdown from other angles. My phone was vibrating continuously now. It was buzzing so hard it was moving across the desk. Missed call Sloane. Missed call Mom. Missed call Mom. Missed call Brent. They were panicked. They were stranded. They were realizing that the ATM me was not just out of order. It had been removed from the wall. I picked up the phone. I did not answer. I swiped the notifications away. I opened the messaging app. I typed one message. I sent it to a group chat named Perry Family that they usually use to tell me what groceries to buy. "You said I had no money. You said if I could not afford it, I should stay behind. So, I removed my money from your pockets. If it is not your money, do not buy it. Sent." I watched the screen on the camera feed. I saw them all look down at their phones simultaneously. Marjorie read it. Her head snapped up, looking around wildly, as if she expected me to be hiding behind a potted plant. She looked furious. But for the first time, she also looked small. The grandeur was gone. The director facade had crumbled. She was just an old woman with a declined credit card and a lot of luggage she couldn't afford to check. Sloane read it and slumped against the wall, sliding down until she was crouching on the floor, her expensive cream dress mopping up the airport dust. The gate agent closed the door to the jetway. The flight was closed. The plane was leaving. Jessica and Todd were already walking away. They didn't even look back. They were distancing themselves from the disaster, dragging their carry-ons back toward the exit. The free ride was over and they weren't sticking around for the fallout. Marjorie was alone with her family, standing amidst a fortress of suitcases that were not going to Maui. My phone buzzed again. A text from Marjorie. I opened it. It was written in all caps. A digital scream. You ungrateful brat. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Fix this now or do not ever call me mom again. I stared at the words years ago. That threat would have terrified me. It would have sent me scrambling to apologize, to fix it, to beg for forgiveness. The fear of losing my mother's love was the leash she had used to choke me for 3 decades. But looking at her now, a pixelated figure on a security monitor, screaming at airline staff because she couldn't steal from me anymore, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel loss. I felt lighter. I typed my reply slowly, savoring every letter. Finally. You told the truth. You only want a mother-daughter relationship when the payment goes through. Enjoy the drive home. I blocked the number. I looked back at the monitor. Marjorie was staring at her phone, her mouth open. She looked like she had been slapped. Director Perry. I spun my chair around. My assistant, erratic but brilliant, was standing in the doorway holding a tablet. We have a situation with the West Coast server. But are you okay? You look I am fine, I said. My voice steady and calm. I am better than fine. I turned off the monitor, severing the visual link to the gate. I didn't need to see them anymore. They were the past. Actually, I said, standing up and smoothing my gray coat. I am excellent. Let us get to work. I have a feeling we are going to have a very productive afternoon. The gate was closed. The bridge was burned. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left standing in the smoke. They were. The structure of my sanctuary was designed to be repulsive from the service road where the delivery trucks idled. Building 4B looked like a relic of the industrial age that had been left to rot. The corrugated metal siding was a patchwork of faded grays and peeling rust. There were no windows on the ground floor. Only high grime-streaked vents that suggested the air inside was as stale as the exterior was depressing. It was the kind of building people drove past and instinctively locked their car doors, assuming it housed nothing more than spare tires and minimum wage to spare. I loved it. It was the perfect filter. I walked down the long corridor from the server farm back toward the executive wing. I had taken a moment to physically check the cooling units, a habit I couldn't break, and now I was crossing the threshold that separated the machinery from the command center. I stopped at the heavy blast-proof door that divided the zones to the uninitiated. It looked like a fire exit in a basement. I leaned forward. A beam of red light swept across my eye. Retina verified. I placed my palm on the scanner. Identity confirmed with a pneumatic hiss. The heavy door slid open and the illusion of the warehouse vanished. I stepped into the hum of North Glass Travel Systems. The air here was crisp, filtered, and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive coffee. The lighting was not the buzzing fluorescent of a garage, but the soft recessed glow of a high-end technology firm. The floors were polished concrete, sleek, and modern. Glass walls separated the conference rooms where teams of analysts were currently dismantling the logistical nightmares of Fortune 500 companies. On the main wall, a massive digital map of the world tracked our active client movements. Thousands of tiny lights pulsed in real-time, planes in the air, cars on the ground, executives moving from point A to point B under our watch. Good afternoon, Director Perry, a junior analyst named Kevin said as he walked past, holding a tablet. The Singapore routing algorithm is up 3% in efficiency since the patch. Excellent work, Kevin, I said. Not breaking stride. Keep monitoring the fuel surcharge variables. Will do. Director. I felt the familiar settle of authority on my shoulders here. I wasn't the daughter who wore old sneakers. I was the architect of a system that moved millions of dollars of human capital every day. I reached the frosted glass doors of my executive suite, intending to bury myself in the quarterly projections and forget the disaster at the airport. But before I could touch the handle, my executive assistant, Elena, stepped out. She looked flustered, which was rare. Elena had managed logistics for military convoys before she came to work for me. She did not rattle easily. "Director," she said, her voice tight. "Security at the perimeter gate just radioed. We have a situation." I paused. "Is it a delivery issue?" "No, Mom. It is a disturbance. There is a woman at the main vehicle gate. She is screaming. She is demanding to see the quote person who handles the money. She is refusing to leave." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I didn't need to ask for a description. "Put it on the main screen," I said, walking past her into my office. Elena tapped her tablet, and the large monitor on my wall switched from the global map to the live feed from Security Camera 1, located at the rusted chain link gate that marked the entrance to our lot. The image was high-def 4K, a sharp contrast to the dirty environment it was recording. There she was, Marjorie Perry. She looked like a peacock stranded in a landfill. She was still wearing her traveling outfit, the silk scarf, the designer sunglasses, the linen trousers that cost $600. But now she was standing in the gravel and oil stains of the cargo access road. Her luggage was nowhere to be seen. She must have left it with Sloan and the others at the curb to take a cab here. She was gripping the bars of the pedestrian gate, shaking them. Her mouth was moving in a rhythmic, violent way that I recognized instantly. She was shrieking. "Audio!" I commanded. The sound filled the room. "No. She is in there. Do not lie to me. I am her mother. Open this gate immediately. This is kidnapping. This is theft." A calm voice belonging to Marcus, my head of physical security, cut in over the intercom. "Mom. This is a private facility. You are trespassing. Please step back from the gate." "Trespassing?" Marjorie screamed, her voice cracking. "My daughter works in this dump. Addison. Addison. I know you are hiding in there. Come out here and fix this card right now. I will call the police. I will tell them you stole family funds." Elena looked at me, her eyes wide. "Director Perry, do you want me to call the police? She is making threats." I watched the screen. Marjorie looked deranged. She was used to intimidating retail workers and concierges. She had no idea she was screaming at a camera connected to a facial recognition database that had already flagged her as a security risk. She thought she was yelling at a warehouse foreman. "She thinks I am an employee," I said softly. "She thinks I am hiding in the back room of a shipping depot because I am ashamed. She claims she is your mother." Elena said cautiously. "She is," I said. "Biologically. At least." Marjorie rattled the gate again. She kicked it with her expensive Italian loafer. "Addison, I know you can hear me. You ungrateful little wretch. You think you can leave us at the airport? I will sue you. I will have you fired. I will speak to your boss." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "She wants to speak to the boss." I turned to Elena. "Tell Marcus to stand down. Do not open the gate, but unlock the pedestrian access door. I will handle this." "Director, are you sure?" Elena asked. "She seems unstable." "She is not unstable. She is just broke," I said. "There is a difference." I checked my reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. I was still wearing the gray coat. I was still wearing the scuffed sneakers. I looked exactly as I had at the airport. I didn't need to put on a power suit to have power. I owned the building. I walked out of the office, down the sleek hallway, and toward the main entrance. I moved through the layers of security, the glass doors, the steel blast doors, the reception area where the logo of North Glass Travel Systems was etched into a slab of granite. I pushed open the final heavy metal door that led to the outside world. The heat hit me instantly, thick and humid. The noise of the airport jet screaming overhead was deafening. I walked across the small employee courtyard toward the main gate. Marjorie saw me coming. She stopped shaking the fence. She straightened her spine, adjusting her sunglasses, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity now that she had an audience. She saw my gray coat, my messy hair. And I saw the sneer return to her face. To her. I still looked like the help. Finally. She shouted over the roar of a departing 747, "Did you finally decide to stop hiding? Do you have any idea how humiliating this has been? Sloan is crying in the taxi stand. You have ruined everything." I stopped 5T from the gate. I did not unlock it. I stood there, hands in my pockets, looking at her through the diamond-shaped holes of the chain-link fence. "You should go home." "Mom," I said. My voice was calm, carried by the silence that followed the jet. "It looks like rain. Open this gate," she demanded, pointing a finger at me through the fence. "I am not going anywhere until you reactivate that card and apologize to your sister. Do you know what you have done? You have committed fraud. I will call the police and tell them you embezzled that money." "Embezzled?" I asked. "From whom? It is my account. It is my name on the statement. You were an authorized user and now you are not. It is family money." She shrieked. "Everything you have is because of us, because we let you live in our house. Because we tolerated you, and this is how you repay us, by working in some filthy warehouse and hoarding your paycheck." She looked around with disdain, sneering at the peeling paint of the exterior wall, at the freight services sign that hung crookedly above the bay door. "Look at this place," she scoffed. "It suits you. Ugly, dirty, hidden away. Just like your life. You belong here, Addison. Among the trash." I stared at her for the first time. Her words didn't hurt. They felt like arrows bouncing off tank armor. "You are right," I said. "This place is hidden. It is designed that way." I took a step closer to the gate. "But you are confused about one thing. Marjorie." I dropped the mom. Her eyes narrowed. "I do not work here," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop lying. I see your little lanyard. I see your cheap shoes. What are you? A dispatcher? A secretary? Go get your manager. I want to speak to the owner of this facility. I will tell them their employee is a thief." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn all day. "You want to speak to the owner?" I asked. "Yes." "Now." "Okay," I said. I turned around and signaled to the security booth. Marcus opened the pedestrian door, just the outer layer. The buzzer sounded buzz. The heavy steel door next to the gate clicked open. Marjorie looked triumphant. She thought she had one. She pushed the gate open and stepped into the courtyard, her heels clicking on the pavement. She marched toward me, her hand raised as if she were about to strike me or grab my ear like I was a child. "About time," she hissed. "Now take me to your boss. I am going to ensure you never work in this town again." "You are standing on private property," I said, not moving. "I do not care. Move." She tried to brush past me, heading toward the building entrance. I let her pass. I let her walk right up to the glass double doors of the main lobby. The doors were tinted, reflecting her angry, distorted face. But as she got close, the motion sensors triggered. The glass doors slid open with a smooth, expensive whoosh. And Marjorie froze. She was expecting a loading dock. She was expecting pallets of boxes and sweating men in forklifts. Instead, she was staring into the atrium of North Glass Travel Systems. She saw the 3-story waterfall feature in the lobby. She saw the reception desk made of imported Italian marble. She saw the massive digital wall displaying complex flight analytics. She saw the staff men and women in tailored suits walking with purpose, carrying tablets and laptops. It looked like the lobby of a hedge fund, not a warehouse. Marjorie stopped dead, her mouth hanging open. She blinked, trying to process the visual disconnect. The peeling rust outside, the futuristic luxury inside. "What?" she whispered. "What is this?" She turned back to me. I was standing behind her, still in my gray coat. "This," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the entryway, "is North Glass Travel Systems. We manage corporate logistics for 60% of the Fortune 500. We handle travel budgets that make your country club fees look like rounding errors." Marjorie stared at me. Her brain was misfiring. "I do not understand. You work here." "I founded it," I said. The color drained from her face completely. She looked from the marble floor to my scuffed sneakers. "You," she stammered. "You own this. Every brick," I said. "Every server and every dollar that passes through it." I walked past her. I walked into the lobby, into the cool air. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, looked up and smiled. "Welcome back, Director Perry," Sarah said clearly. "I have the legal team online, too. For you." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. I turned back to Marjorie. She was still standing on the doormat, half in the heat, half in the AC. She looked small. She looked incredibly, painfully ordinary. "You threatened to call my boss," I said, my voice hard as diamond. "Well, here I am. What is your complaint?" Marjorie made a sound like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes darted around the lobby, seeing the wealth she had always craved, seeing the power she worshipped, and realizing it belonged to the daughter she had treated like a servant. "Addison," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You have all this, and you let me worry about money." "I never let you worry," I said. "I paid for everything. I paid for the cars. I paid for the trips. I paid for your image. I used the profits from this company to subsidize your delusions of grandeur because I wanted a mother." I stepped closer, blocking her view of my empire. "But you made it very clear at the airport. You only want people who can afford the ticket." "Well, I can afford the plane, Marjorie. I can afford the airline." Marjorie reached out a hand, her fingers trembling. She looked like she wanted to touch the sleeve of my cheap coat, as if hoping the fabric would turn to gold under her fingers. "Addison, darling, please. We are family. This is wonderful. We can know." I cut her off. "We cannot." I pointed to the door. "You are trespassing," I said. "And unlike the airport, I do not need a ticket agent to remove you, Addison." She cried. The tears starting now. Tears of greed, not sorrow. "You cannot do this. I am your mother. You are a woman who just tried to break into a secure facility," I said. I looked at the security guard standing by the console. "Marcus, please escort this visitor off the premises. She is not on the authorized list yet." "Director," Marcus said, stepping forward. He was 6 feet 4 inches and not smiling. Marjorie looked at me one last time. She saw the logo on the wall. She saw the respect in the eyes of my staff. And she saw me. For the first time in 30 years. She actually saw me. "Addison," she whispered. "Goodbye, Marjorie," I said. "Flights are expensive. I hope you saved enough for the taxi home. I turned my back on her. I walked toward the elevators, listening to the sound of Marcus firmly guiding her out, her heels scraping against the pavement as she resisted, her voice fading as the heavy glass doors slid shut, sealing my world away from hers. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished steel. I didn't look like a baggage handler anymore. The adrenaline from the confrontation in the lobby had faded, replaced by a cold clinical need for dissection. I was no longer standing in the heat of the afternoon sun. I was seated in what my staff called the war room, a soundproof conference area lined with whiteboards and secure terminals. Across from me sat Elias, a forensic accountant I had kept on retainer for corporate audits. Elias was a man of few words and even fewer emotions. He treated numbers like crime scenes. And today he was looking at a massacre. It is not just the credit cards, Addison, Elias said, sliding a tablet across the polished mahogany table. The $9,540 for the flight was just a crime of opportunity. What I am seeing here going back 18 months is structural. I looked at the spreadsheet. It was a kaleidoscope of red ink. Explain, I said, leaning forward. Look at these transfers. Elias pointed a stylus at a series of transactions labeled consulting fees and venue coordination. They were recurring payments, usually around $2,000 or $3,000, paid out from my personal account to an entity called Maddox Strategic Partners LLC. I remember these, I said, frowning. Sloan told me Brent was starting a consulting firm to help small businesses with digital marketing. She asked me to invest to help him get off the ground. She said it was for software licenses and office space. Right? Elias said. So I ran a background check on Maddox Strategic Partners. It is registered to a post office box in a strip mall 3 towns over. No website. No employees. No state tax filings for revenue. He tapped the screen again, and here is where the money went after it hit his account. It didn't go to software. It went to DraftKings FanDuel and a luxury car lease payment for a vehicle registered in Brent's name. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. He was gambling with my seed money. He was laundering your money to fund a gambling addiction and a lifestyle he could not afford. Elias corrected. But that is just the petty theft. This is the part that concerns me. He swiped to a new page. This one looked different. It was a credit report, but not a standard consumer one. It was a commercial trade line report. Do you recall opening a trade credit account with Apex Logistics Supply? Elias asked. No, I said instantly. We use internal procurement. I have never heard of Apex. Well, Elias said grimly. According to this, you opened a $50,000 line of credit with them 6 months ago. The guarantor signature is yours. The social security number is yours. But the contact email brentmedex85@gmail.com. The room seemed to drop a few degrees in temperature. He stole my identity, I whispered. He used my personal information, which he probably got from tax documents I foolishly left at my mother's house, to open a line of credit, and he maxed it out. Elias added, $49,000 in travel vouchers and gift cards that are untraceable. He has been living off your credit rating. Addison, this defaults. It hits you. It hits North Glass. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer scale of the betrayal. I had thought they were just leeches. I thought they were just entitled lazy people who like nice things. But this was predatory. This was calculated. He is not just a deadbeat, I said, staring at the empty board. He is a criminal. There is more. A new voice said. I turned. Standing in the doorway was Marcus, my head of security, and next to him was Sarah from the IT department. Sarah looked pale. She was holding a sheath of log reports. What is it? I asked. When you told us to lock down the family accounts, We ran a full audit on all devices that had ever connected to the North Glass private network. Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. We found a device. An iPad Pro. MAC address. Ending in F4A. I gave that iPad to Sloan 2 Christmases ago. I said. For the baby to watch cartoons. It has not been watching cartoons, Sarah said. She walked over and laid the logs on the table next to Elias's financial report. For the last 3 months, that device has been accessing the secure employee portal via a VPN. It bypassed the standard geofencing because she hesitated because it was using your old admin credentials, the ones you haven't changed since the startup days because you used them for legacy override. I felt the blood drain from my face. What did they access? Not the bank accounts, Sarah said. They accessed the repository. The repository? That was where we kept the proprietary code. That was where the pricing algorithm, the crown jewel of North Glass, the math that made us worth millions, lived. Did they download it? Asked. My voice barely a whisper. They tried. Sarah said. They viewed the source code documentation. They took screenshots. We can see the capture logs. And 2 weeks ago, there was an email sent from that device to a competitor of ours, Red Wing Logistics. I closed my eyes. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a sickening crunch. Brent wasn't just gambling. He was drowning in debt. He had maxed out the credit line he stole from me. He needed a way out. And he realized that the baggage handler sister-in-law actually sat on a gold mine. He wasn't smart enough to understand the code, but he was smart enough to know that Red Wing would pay a fortune for a look at our pricing structure. He was trying to sell me out. He was trying to sell my life's work to cover his bad bets. He is a corporate spy, I said. My brother-in-law is attempting industrial espionage. We have the IP logs, Sarah said. We have the timestamps. We can prove the device was in his possession because the GPS data matches his check-ins on Facebook. I looked at the table. On one side, financial fraud. On the other, intellectual property theft. Get Veronica. I told Elena, who was taking notes in the corner. I need general counsel now. 10 minutes later, Veronica sat at the table. She was a shark in a silk blouse, the kind of lawyer who ate non-compete agreements for breakfast. She listened to Elias. She listened to Sarah. She looked at the proofs. We have him, Veronica said, her voice flat and dangerous. Identity theft. White fraud. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act violations. Theft of trade secrets. Addison. We are talking about federal charges. 10 years minimum. If we go to the FBI with this, they will come for him with a battering ram. She looked at me. But it is your family. Are you ready to do that? Once we file this, you cannot undo it. He will go to prison. Sloan will be dragged into it as an accomplice if she knew. Marjorie. Marjorie will claim ignorance, I said. But she benefited from the money. She drank the wine that the fraud bought. I looked at the whiteboard where I had started mapping out the timeline, the emergency loans, the stolen credit line, the screenshots of my code. They did not hesitate. Veronica, I said. They left me at an airport. They told me I wasn't worth the price of a ticket. They have been selling me off piece by piece for years. They didn't treat me like family. They treated me like a harvest. I looked her in the eye. File it, I said. File everything. I want the civil suit for the money and I want the criminal referral for the data theft. Prepare the package for the district attorney. Consider it done, Veronica said, closing her laptop. I will have the draft complaints ready by tomorrow morning. The room began to clear out as my team went to execute their orders. Elias went to freeze the shell company assets. Sarah went to lock down the firewalls. I sat alone in the war room, the hum of the servers vibrating through the floor. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at it. It was a text message. Send her mom. Picked it up. After the screaming at the gate, after the scene at my office fence, I expected more rage. I expected threats. But the text was different. Addison. Honey. I think we all got a little emotional today. The heat. The stress of the baby coming. It was too much. We are at a hotel near the airport. We didn't go to Maui. We couldn't leave things like this. Can you come meet us? Just you and me. Let's have dinner. I miss my girl. We need to talk about how to fix this family. I stared at the screen. Honey. My girl. She had not called me honey since I was 6 years old. A week ago. That text would have made me cry with relief. I would have driven to the hotel. I would have paid for the dinner. I would have apologized for causing a scene. But now I had the spreadsheet. Now I knew about the $50,000 credit line. Now I knew about the stolen code. She didn't want to fix the family. She wanted to know why the credit card stopped working. She wanted to know if I had really cut the money off forever. She was changing tactics because the stick hadn't worked. So now she was trying the carrot. You only change your voice when you see the money leaving. I said to the phone. I didn't reply. I didn't block her this time. I wanted her to wait. I wanted her to stare at her phone, wondering if the manipulation was working. While I sat here with a lawyer drafting the document that would end her lifestyle, I stood up and walked to the window of the conference room. Outside. The sky was turning a bruised purple as evening set in. The runway lights of Charleston International were flickering on. I was about to leave the room to go back to my office when a red alert bar flashed across the main security monitor on the wall. System alert critical unauthorized access attempt. Source external VPN target admin root pricing engine timestamp. Now I froze. Sarah. I shouted. Hitting the intercom button. I see it. Sarah's voice crackled back tight with tension. Someone is trying to brute force the login. They are using an old password script. Is it the iPad? I asked. No. Sarah said. It is a laptop. But the IP address it is coming from the hotel Wi-Fi at the airport Marriott. I looked at the text message from Marjorie again. We are at a hotel near the airport. A cold smile touched my lips. They weren't just asking for a truce. While Marjorie was texting me sweet nothings to distract me, Brent was sitting in the hotel room, frantically trying to break into my system one last time to steal the only thing they had left to sell. They were trying to rob the house while inviting the owner to dinner. Let them try. I said into the intercom. Do not block it yet. Sarah. Let him think the door is creaking open. I want to see exactly how greedy he is. The red light on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat. Someone was knocking on the door in the dark, and they had no idea that the monster they were afraid of was waiting on the other side, holding the key. The red alert bar on the wall monitor was not a panic signal to me. It was an invitation. I turned away from the window, leaving the view of the darkened runway behind. The sentimental part of me, the daughter who wanted to have dinner with her mother, had died the moment I saw that IP address from the airport Marriott. Now only the CEO remained. Sarah. I said. My voice low and devoid of any tremor. Do not block the connection. Not yet. I walked back to the head of the table in the war room. Veronica, my general counsel, was already typing furiously on her laptop. Elias, the forensic accountant, was organizing the digital paper trail. They looked up as I approached. They saw the shift in my demeanor. The grieving daughter was gone. The predator had arrived. He is knocking on the door, I told them, gesturing to the screen where the login attempts were scrolling. He is using a brute force script. It is crude, loud, and desperate. He is trying to break a window because he does not have the key. If we let him in, he could damage the architecture, Sarah warned, her fingers hovering over her kill switch. He could delete files. He could plant malware. We are not going to let him into the house. I corrected her. We are going to build a shed in the backyard. Paint it to look like the house and watch him set it on fire. I sat down and pulled my keyboard closer. We are going to sandbox him. I want you to spin up a mirror directory. Isolate it completely from the main server cluster. Make it look like the root admin folder. Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. A honeypot. Exactly. I said. Title the directory Fair Engine Source v4. Make it look juicy. Make it look like the Holy Grail. I leaned in. My eyes scanning the code Sarah was beginning to assemble on the shared screen. Inside that folder. Continued. I want you to place 2 files. One labeled Investor Pitch Deck Q3, and one labeled Algorithm Schematics. But they are not real files. I will load them with a pixel beacon, Sarah said. Catching my rhythm. And a digital watermark. Aggressive watermarking. I ordered. The kind that survives file conversion. If he downloads those files, I want a script embedded that pings us with the location of every device that ever opens them. I want to know if he sends it to Red Wing. I want to know if he puts it on a USB drive. I want that file to be a radioactive isotope that lights up his entire network. Done, Sarah said. Her keystrokes were a rapid staccato, the sound of a digital cage being welded shut. I am setting up the logging now. Screen capture, keystroke logging, and geolocation triangulation. If he so much as moves his mouse inside that folder, we will have it on video. I turned to Veronica. This takes it out of the realm of family dispute and into industrial espionage. Correct. Absolutely, Veronica said. Her face grim. Unauthorized access with intent to exfiltrate trade secrets. If he downloads those files, he commits a federal felony in real time. We won't just be suing him for money, Addison. We will be handing the FBI a closed case. I watched the screen. The brute force attacks were still hitting the firewall. Bam, bam, bam. He was persistent. Or rather, he was panicked. He needed money and he needed it tonight. But I needed to make sure he felt safe enough to take the final step. I needed to lower his guard. I picked up my phone. I unlocked the screen and opened the text thread with Brent. The last message from him was from 3 months ago, asking for a short-term bridge loan that I had foolishly granted. I typed carefully. I needed to sound like I was wavering. I needed to sound like the Addison they knew, the one who could be bullied. Brent. Mom says you are all at the hotel. I saw the missed calls. If you want to talk about the money and the credit cards, come to my office. We can work something out, but not over the phone. I hit send. I held my breath. The strategy was risky. I was inviting a wolf into my den, but I needed him here physically. I needed him to sign the confession I was about to have Veronica draft. And I needed him away from the hotel Wi-Fi so that when the trap snapped shut, he had nowhere to run. The response came 30 seconds later. He didn't text back. Okay. Or on my way. He texted. You think you can cut us off? I know about the North Glass valuation, Addison. I know what you're hiding. I will drag you down with me if you don't fix this. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Have the checkbook ready. I stared at the screen. I will drag you down with me. He thought he had leverage. He thought he knew something. It was almost pitiful. He was playing checkers. And I had already set fire to the board. He is coming, I announced to the room. Veronica cleared her throat. She was holding a piece of paper she had just printed from the audit of Brent's shared cloud drive. The one we accessed because he had foolishly linked it to his consulting email on our server. Addison, she said, her voice serious. Before he gets here, you need to see this. She slid the paper across the table. It was a document titled Loan Agreement. It was dated 2 years ago. It detailed a loan of $50,000 from Addison Perry to Brent Maddox with terms that essentially said the loan was forgivable if not repaid within 24 months. At the bottom was my signature. But it wasn't my signature. It was a clumsy trace job likely lifted from a birthday card or a check I had given them. The loops on the A were too wide. The slant was wrong. He forged this, I said, my blood running cold. He prepared this in case I ever came after him for the money he stole using my identity. He was going to claim I agreed to it. It is forgery, Veronica said. And since he intended to use it to defraud a creditor it is another felony count. But it tells me something else about his mindset. He has been planning to burn you for a long time. Addison, this wasn't an accident. This was an exit strategy. I crumpled the paper in my hand. The last shred of guilt I felt about what I was about to do evaporated. They hadn't just used me. They had prepared a legal coffin for me just in case I ever stopped being useful. Get the district attorney on the line, I said to Veronica. Use the contact we established during the Databach investigation last year. Tell him we have an active intrusion and a suspect en route who has already committed identity theft and forgery. Tell him I want to coordinate a controlled catch. Veronica nodded and stepped out of the room to make the call. I turned back to Sarah. Is the honeypot ready? Leave, Sarah said. I have opened port 8080. It is the only door unlocked. If he scans our network, it will look like a vulnerability in the legacy system. He will think he found a back door. Revoke every other token. I commanded. Kill the VPN access for the iPad. Kill the old admin credentials. Force him through that one specific door. I want to guide him down the hallway right into the trap. Done, Sarah said. All other access points are dark. I stood up and smoothed my gray coat. I needed to prepare the stage. Marcus. I radioed the security chief. Go ahead, Director. Marcus' voice came back solid and reassuring. Mr. Maddox will be arriving at the main gate in approximately 15 minutes. He will likely be aggressive. He may be shouting. Do you want us to hold him at the perimeter? No, I said. Let him in. Treat him like a VIP. Open the gate. Open the doors. I want him to feel powerful. I want him to feel like he bullied his way in. I paused. Checking the camera feed of the lobby. Escort him to conference room B, the glass one near the front. Do not bring him back to the war room. And Marcus, make sure the network jack in conference room B is patched directly into the honeypot server, not the main network. If he plugs in, he goes exactly where we want him. Understood, Marcus said. We will roll out the red carpet to the cell. I walked over to the whiteboard and erased the timeline I had drawn. I didn't want him to see that we knew everything. I wanted him to think I was scrambling. I looked at the investor deck file on Sarah's screen. It sat there innocent and deadly. A file that contained nothing of value yet cost everything to steal. Why? Elias asked from the table. He was stacking the financial evidence into a neat pile. Why go through all this theater? We have enough to arrest him now for the credit card fraud because credit card fraud gets him probation and a payment plan he will never honor. I said, turning to face the accountant. I do not want my money back. Elias, I want them to understand that they cannot touch me. If I arrest him for fraud, he is a victim of bad luck. If I catch him stealing the source code, he is a predator who picked the wrong prey. I looked at the clock. 7:55 in the evening. Besides, I added, a dark satisfaction settling in my chest. He said he wanted to drag me down. I'm just giving him the rope. Veronica re-entered the room. The ADA is on board. He says if we can get him to admit to the forgery or capture him downloading the proprietary data, they will authorize an immediate arrest warrant. He is sending a detective to wait in the security office. They will be here in 10 minutes. Perfect, I said. The stage was set. The script was written. The actors were taking their places. My phone buzzed again. Brent. At the gate. Tell your monkey to let me in. I didn't reply. I nodded to the screen where the security feed showed a rental car, a flashy convertible, naturally pulling up to the gate. Brent was behind the wheel, looking furious and red-faced. I watched as the gate slid open. I watched as he drove through, believing he had intimidated me into submission. He didn't see the cameras tracking his tires. He didn't know that the monkey at the gate was a former Special Forces operator who was currently logging his arrival time for a police report. Brent parked the car crookedly, taking up 2 spaces. He slammed the door and marched toward the entrance. I turned to my team. Showtime, I said. Sarah. Eyes on the logs. Veronica. Have the confession ready. I am going to the conference room. Be careful. Addison. Veronica said softly. He is cornered. I know, I said. I touched the pocket where my phone was recording audio. That is when they make mistakes. I left the safety of the war room and walked down the long silent hallway toward the front of the building. The lights were dimmed for the night, casting long shadows across the polished concrete. I reached conference room B. I stepped inside and sat at the head of the table. I placed a single file folder in front of me, the one containing the forged loan agreement and the credit card receipts. I waited. I heard the heavy thud of the front doors opening. I heard Marcus's polite voice offering directions. I heard Brent's heavy footsteps approaching. He didn't knock. He shoved the glass door open so hard it rattled in its frame. Brent Maddox stood there. He was wearing the same linen blazer from the airport, but it was rumpled now. He smelled of Hotel Jean and nervous sweat. His eyes were wild. You think you're smart? He spat, stepping into the room. You think you can embarrass us and just walk away? I didn't stand up. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him with the calm detachment of an undertaker measuring a client for a suit. Hello, Brent, I said. Please have a seat. We have a lot of accounting to do. Behind him, unseen in the shadows of the lobby, the elevator indicator light turned red. The detective had arrived. But Brent didn't look back. He looked at me and then he looked at the network port in the center of the table. He reached into his bag and pulled out his laptop. I'm not here to talk, he said, opening the lid. I'm here to take what's mine. He plugged the Ethernet cable into the wall in the war room. Sarah's screen flashed. Connection established. Target in the honeypot. I smiled. Go ahead. Brent. I said softly. Take it. I pulled my sedan into the porte cochere of the airport Marriott. The building was a generic slab of concrete and glass, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of streetlights. It was the kind of place people stayed when they had missed a connection, or when their lives had gone off the rails. Tonight, it was both. I had left my office 20 minutes ago. I had not let Brent plug his laptop into my network. Not really. When he had reached for the cable in conference room B, I had placed my hand over the port and told him that if he wanted to discuss money, he would do it with his wife present. I wanted witnesses. I wanted Sloan to see the dissection. I wanted to burn the rot out of the family tree, root and branch. Before I called the authorities, he had stormed out, furious, and driven here. I followed. I walked through the lobby, my bag heavy with the file folder labeled the receipt. The air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, but when I reached Suite 412 and pushed the door open, the heat of the tension was suffocating. They were all there. Marjorie was sitting in an armchair looking like a deposed queen in exile, holding a glass of white wine. Sloan was curled up on the sofa, her face blotchy from crying, clutching a tissue. Brent was pacing by the window, his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up, looking like a man trying to figure out which wall he could punch through. You finally decided to show up, Marjorie said. Her voice was not the sweet honey from the text message. It was brittle and sharp. We have been waiting for an hour. Do you have any idea what you have done to your sister? Sloane looked up. Her eyes were red. My friends left. Addison, Jessica, and Todd took an Uber back to the city. They said they were humiliated. They said they didn't know we were charity cases. They are not charity cases. Brent snapped. Turning from the window. Addison is just on a power trip. She locked the cards because she is jealous. She sees you going to Maui and she can't stand it. I closed the door behind me. I did not sit down. I stood by the entrance, keeping the exit clear. We are going to have one conversation, I said. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of the pleading tone I had used for 30 years. I am going to lay out the facts. I am going to show you the math. And here is the rule. If anyone interrupts me, if anyone screams or if anyone lies, I walk out that door. And if I walk out, the next time you see me, we'll be in a courtroom. Don't you dare threaten us, Marjorie began, rising from her chair. Sit down, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The command cracked like a whip. Marjorie sat. She looked shocked, as if the furniture had bitten her. I walked to the coffee table in the center of the room. I placed the black binder and the red file folder down. You said I was selfish, I began, looking at Sloane. You said I have money and I don't share it. You said I embarrassed the family. I opened the binder. I flipped to the page with the circled transactions. In the last 5 years, I have transferred a total of $142,000 to support this family, I said. That includes your car payments, Sloane. That includes the loans for Brent's failed businesses. That includes the country club dues for Mom. Sloane blinked. That can't be right. Mom said you just helped out with the little things. Mom liet, I said. I pushed the paper toward her. Look at the numbers. Sloane, I have been paying your mortgage for 6 months. Sloane looked at the paper. Her hand trembled as she traced the lines. But today, continued, we are talking about the $9,540. I pulled out the invoice for the flight. Mom told me flights were $1,450 each. I said. She told me that in front of everyone to make me feel small. But that math only works for 4 people. There were 5 tickets on this invoice. I pointed to the names. Jessica Tate. Todd Tate. Sloane looked up. Confusion. Knitting her brow. What note? Jessica and Todd bought their own tickets. They told me. They didn't. I said Marjorie bought them with my card. She was treating your rich friends to a 5-star vacation, so she could look like the generous matriarch while telling me to my face that I was too poor to come along. Sloane turned to Marjorie. Mom, you paid for them. You told me they insisted on coming. Marjorie took a large sip of wine, avoiding Sloane's eyes. It was an investment. Sloane Todd is in real estate. It was good networking for Brent. We had to make a good impression. Addison can afford it. She runs a company. So you stole from your daughter to impress strangers. I summarized. It is not stealing. Marjorie snapped. It is family resources. Let's talk about resources. I said. I turned to Brent. He stopped pacing. He crossed his arms, trying to look intimidating. I don't need to listen to this. You're just trying to divide us. I am not trying to divide you, Brent, I said. I am trying to save my sister from a predator. I opened the red folder. I pulled out a specific bank statement from 2 years ago. Sloane, I said, keeping my eyes on her husband. Do you remember when you called me, crying? Because Brent said the IRS had frozen his accounts and you were going to lose the house. You asked me for $50,000. You said it was life or death. Sloane wiped her eyes. Yet, it was terrifying. You saved us. I gave you the money. I said I transferred $50,000 to the account Brent provided. He said he paid the IRS. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a transaction log from Elias's forensic audit. He didn't pay the IRS. I said the day after I sent the money, $45,000 was transferred to a travel agency called Lux Escape. And 3 days later, a charge appeared for a 10-day stay at the Four Seasons in Bora Bora. Sloan went very still. Bora Bora. He went on a business trip that week. I said. Remember, he said he had to go to meet investors in Los Angeles. He was in Bora Bora. I said. Alone. Or at least with a single ticket. Sloan looked at Brent. Her face was pale, stripped of all the makeup in the pretense. Brent. You said the IRS took everything. Brent's face turned a violent shade of red. It was stress relief. I was under pressure. You don't understand how hard I worked to keep up with your mother's demands. You stole from my sister. I said coldly. And you stole from me. And you let your pregnant wife believe she was on the verge of homelessness while you were drinking cocktails on a beach. Sloan stood up. She looked unsteady. She looked at the husband she had defended for years, the man she had mocked me for not liking. Is it true? She whispered. It's complicated, Brent yelled. She's manipulating the data, she's framing me. The data doesn't lie. Brent, I said. But you do. I turned back to the table. I have more. I have the credit line you opened in my name. I have the forged loan agreement. I have the logs of you gambling away the seed money I gave you for your consulting firm. I looked at Marjorie and you knew, didn't you, Mom? You knew he was spending money we didn't have. But as long as he drove the right car and wore the right suit, you didn't care where it came from. Marjorie set her glass down hard. It cracked against the table. You're a vicious, cold-hearted girl, she hissed. You come here to this hotel and you destroy your sister's marriage. You humiliate your mother for what? For money. You have plenty. Why are you so greedy? It is not about the money, I said. It is about the fact that you looked me in the eye at the airport and told me to stay behind because I wasn't good enough for your picture. Well, look at the picture now. Marjorie. It is ugly and I am the only one holding the camera. Brent lunged forward. He slammed his hands on the table, leaning into my face. You think you can ruin me? He snarled. I will sue you. I will sue you for defamation. I will tell everyone you cooked these books. I will claim emotional distress. You will spend the next 10 years in court. I didn't blink. I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath. Go ahead and sue, I said calmly. But remember, Brent, civil court is public record, and so is criminal court. Criminal. Brent laughed. A nervous barking sound. You wouldn't dare. We are family. Sloan wouldn't let you. I looked at Sloan. She was standing by the window, staring out at the darkness. She wasn't defending him anymore. I am filing the police report tomorrow morning. I said identity theft. White fraud. Forgery. My lawyer has the package ready for the district attorney. You can't do that to your brother-in-law. Marjorie screamed. Think of the baby. You want your niece's father in prison. I want my niece's father to be someone who doesn't steal her college fund to play fantasy football. I said. I picked up my folder. I had said what I needed to say. I had broken the spell. Sloan was shattered. But she was awake. Marjorie was cornered and Brent was exposed. I am done, I said. The credit cards are canceled. The bank accounts are frozen. The Bank of Addison is closed permanently. Figure it out. I turned to walk to the door. Addison, Marjorie cried out. Her voice changed again. It wasn't angry this time. It was desperate. The plea of a drowning woman. Addison. Please. You can't leave us here. We can't pay for this hotel room. We don't have a ride home. We are your family. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at them. The tableau of misery. Mom, I said. Do you remember what you said to me at the terminal when I was standing there with my bag? Marjorie stared at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You said, if you cannot afford it, stay behind. I opened the door. I suggest you call an Uber, I said. If you can find a card that works. I walked out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling the sound of Marjorie sobbing.
I våket fast.
I needed to get to the elevator. I needed fresh air. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cancer out. I pressed the down button. Addison. The voice was low and menacing. I turned. Brent had followed me into the hallway. He wasn't yelling now. He was standing 10 feet away, his hands in his pockets, staring at me with a look of pure distilled hatred. You think you won, he said. It is over. Brent, I said. Go back to your wife while you still have one. He took a step closer. The hallway was empty. You think you're so smart with your little company and your little secrets? He said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more threat than a scream. But you forgot something. I lived in your house for 3 months when we were renovating. I used your Wi-Fi. I know things. You know nothing, I said, though a small alarm bell rang in the back of my mind. I know your password structure, he grinned, a feral showing of teeth. And I know you haven't changed the root admin credentials since you started that place because you're sentimental. You think you locked me out? I have been inside your system before. Addison. I have looked around. The elevator dinged. The door slid open. I stepped inside. I looked at him. If you touch my company, I said, I will bury you. Brent didn't move. He just smiled. A look of desperate, reckless malice. You better check your servers, Director Perry, he said. Because tonight is going to be a very long night. The doors closed, cutting off his face. I stood in the descending elevator, watching the numbers drop. For 3-2 he was bluffing. He had to be. I had revoked the tokens. I had locked the VPN. But then I remembered what Sarah had said. He is using a brute force script. He is trying to break a window. Brent was desperate. He was facing prison. He had no money. No wife. No future. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. He wasn't going to go to sleep. He was going to try to burn the house down. I pulled out my phone as the doors opened to the lobby. I texted Sarah. He is coming. Prepare the trap. Make sure the bait looks real. I walked out into the night. The air was heavy with the smell of storm. The family drama was over. The war for my life's work was about to begin. And Brent Maddox had just told me exactly where he was going to strike. 3M was coming fast. And I would be waiting. The digital clock on the wall of the war room read 2:58 in the morning. The silence in the office was heavy. A physical weight that pressed against my eardrums. It was the dead hour. The time when the world is suspended between the mistakes of yesterday and the consequences of tomorrow. I was standing behind Sarah's chair. My hands gripping the backrest so hard my knuckles had turned white. Elias was pacing in the corner. A cup of cold coffee forgotten in his hand. We had been waiting for 3 hours. Maybe he went to sleep. Elias muttered. Maybe he realized it was a bad idea. He did not go to sleep. I said. My eyes fixed on the network topography map displayed on the main screen. Gamblers do not sleep when they are down. They chase the loss as if summoned by my words. The screen flickered. A single red pixel lit up on the perimeter of our network defense grid. Then another. Then a cluster. Here we go. Sarah said. Her voice tight. Incoming connection request. Source IP is local. Very local. Triangulate it. I commanded. It is not the hotel, Sarah said, her fingers flying across her mechanical keyboard. The clicking sound like gunfire in the quiet room. Signal strength is maximum. He is using a high-gain antenna. Addison. He is in the south parking lot. I looked at the external security feed on the secondary monitor. It was pitch black outside. The only light coming from the distant runway markers. But there, parked in the shadows of the dumpster enclosure, was a dark shape. The rental convertible. He was sitting in his car 50 yards from where I stood. He is trying the brute force script again, Sarah reported. Wait. No. He changed the vector. He is injecting a token on the screen. A command line scrolled rapidly. O token user B. Maddox legacy status validating. He kept an old session token. I realized aloud. From when he lived in my house. He must have scraped it from his browser cache. It is an expired key, Sarah said. The system should reject it. Status access granted. Sandbox honeypot. He is in. Sarah exhaled. The system routed him directly to the bait folder. He thinks his old key worked. I leaned in closer. What is he doing? He is navigating the directory, Sarah narrated. He is ignoring the system files. He is going straight for the folder labeled Fair Engine Source. He thinks he just cracked the vault. On the screen, we watched the cursor Brent's ghost hover over the file named Investor Pitch Deck Q3. This was the file we had laced with the digital watermark. The moment he downloaded it, he was marking himself as a thief. Come on, Brent, I whispered. Take the bait. Don't be smart. Just be greedy. Command download initiated. File transfer 25% 50%. Got him, Elias said from the corner. That is theft of trade secrets. We have the packet capture. Wait, Sarah said sharply. He is stopping. The download bar froze at 80%. Why did he stop? I asked. He can lead the transfer, Sarah said, panic creeping into her voice. He is moving out of the folder. He is going up a directory level. He knows it is a trap. No, Sarah said, her eyes widening as she read the logs. He is looking for something else. He is executing a search query. Search term client list global. He does not just want the code Addison. He wants the customer database. He wants to sell the client contacts to Red Wing that is in the active partition. I said he cannot get there from the honeypot. He is running a privilege escalation script. Sarah said it is a dirty script. Something he probably bought on the dark web. It is hammering the partition wall. Addison. He is causing a memory leak. On the main dashboard, the system health indicators began to slide from green to yellow. CPU load 85%. Latency 120 milliseconds. He is flooding the server to confuse the firewall. I realized if he keeps this up, he is going to crash the routing engine. We have flights taking off in 3 hours. If the system is down, thousands of passengers will be stranded. I have to block him, Sarah said, her hand hovering over the kill switch. If I cut the connection, we save the system, but we lose the active trace. No, I said. If you cut him now, he claims it was a glitch. He claims he was just logging in to check an old email. We need him to cross the line. We need him to try to break the wall. System load is at 90%. Sarah yelled. Addison. The morning batch processing is stalling. We are losing operational capacity. The room was suddenly hot. The hum of the cooling fans in the server room next door kicked into high gear. A jet engine roar that vibrated through the floor. Isolate the partition, I ordered. Do not kick him out. Build a wall around him. Shrink the sandbox. He is fighting it. Sarah said he is launching a log wiper. He is trying to scrub his tracks while he attacks. It is eating up all our processing power. I looked at the screen. It was a digital brawl. Brent was throwing everything he had at the door, and my server was choking on the traffic. I need to see him, I said. I grabbed the radio. Marcus, give me a tight zoom on the driver's side of that car. The security monitor zoomed in. The image was grainy, illuminated only by the blue light of a laptop screen reflecting off a sweaty face. Brent looked manic. His hair was wild, his tie undone. He was typing furiously, his lips moving in a stream of curses. I could almost hear. He didn't look like a family member. He looked like an addict breaking into a pharmacy. He is panicking, I said. He knows the script isn't working fast enough. Latency is at 300 milliseconds. Sarah warned the Singapore node just timed out. Addison. We are taking damage. I had to make a choice. Save the evidence or save the company. Sarah, I said. My voice ice cold. Execute the lockdown protocol. Not a disconnect. A freeze. Trap his session in a loop so he cannot disconnect. But cut his write access to 0. Initiating lockdown, Sarah said. She hit a sequence of keys on the screen. The chaotic scrolling of logs slowed down. The CPU load dropped. He is stuck, Sarah said. He is spinning his wheels in a read-only void. He can't get out. Good, I said. Now hand me the phone. I dialed the number for the lead detective I had coordinated with hours ago. He was sitting in an unmarked car just outside the perimeter fence, waiting for my signal. This is Perry, I said into the receiver. The suspect is actively engaged in a cyber intrusion from the south lot. We have captured the download of proprietary data and an attempted destruction of server logs. He is yours. Copy that. Perry. The detective's voice crackled. Moving in. I watched the screen. Brent was still typing. Slamming the keys now. He must have realized the system had frozen. He was trying to force a log out. He was trying to run the delete command one last time to wipe the evidence from his own machine. He is trying to execute a format drive command on his local machine. Sarah said he is trying to destroy the laptop. He can't, I said. We have the session mirrored. It doesn't matter what he does to his hardware. But looking at him on the camera, seeing the sheer desperation, the way he was looking over his shoulder, I felt a strange detached pity. He was a rat in a maze, and he had just realized there was no cheese. Wait, Sarah said. He is bypassing the software. He is opening a terminal window. He is typing a root command. I looked at the code scrolling on the monitor.
Pseudo-RM.
He is nuking it. Sarah said he is trying to delete everything, not just the logs. He is trying to corrupt the honeypot itself to hide the download. If he executes that command while the session is bridged, I asked what happens. It could corrupt the mirrored evidence file, Sarah said. We might lose the timestamp of the download. How long until the police get to his car? I asked. I looked at the external feed. I saw the headlights of the unmarked cruiser sweeping into the lot. They were moving fast. But they were still 30 seconds away. Brent's finger was hovering over the enter key. I could see it on the high-resolution zoom. He was hesitating. He knew that once he pressed that button, there was no going back. It was the nuclear option. Sarah, I said. Can we intercept the keystroke? No. She said. He is on the client side. We are just watching. The cruisers were closing in. No sirens. Just silent. Predatory speed. Brent looked up. He saw the lights reflecting in his rearview mirror. His eyes went wide. He looked back at the screen. The hesitation vanished. He wasn't going to get caught with the files. He was going to burn it all down. He is going to do it, I said. My heart hammered against my ribs. If he wiped the drive now, a good defense lawyer might be able to argue that the logs on our end were fabricated. I needed that laptop intact. Don't do it, Brent. I whispered to the screen. Don't be an idiot. On the monitor, I saw his finger descend. He hit enter. The command line on our screen flashed red. Critical error. Remote deletion attempted. File integrity compromised. He hit it. Sarah yelled. The mirror is fragmenting. Police are 10 seconds out. Elias shouted, pointing at the window. I looked at the camera feed. The cruiser screeched to a halt. Boxing in the convertible. Doors flew open. Officers with drawn weapons spilled out. But inside the car, Brent wasn't looking at them. He was staring at his screen, which was now cascading with red error messages. He was frantically trying to close the lid, to smash the machine, to do anything to finish the job. Sarah, I barked. Did we save the hash? Did we get the digital fingerprint before he hit delete? I don't know. Sarah was typing frantically. The file is corrupting. I am trying to salvage the header. I looked at the clock. 3:05. Outside. An officer was banging on Brent's window. Glass shattered. They were pulling him out. But the laptop had fallen to the floor of the car. Still running. Still executing the wipe command. 60 seconds. Sarah said. Her voice trembling. The wipe script is aggressive. It will overwrite the sector in 60 seconds. If they don't cut the power to that machine, we lose the primary evidence. I grabbed the radio. Detective. The laptop. Get the laptop. Cut the power. Do not let it finish the cycle. There was only static on the other end. The detective was in the middle of a physical struggle with Brent, who was kicking and screaming on the asphalt. I watched the progress bar on my screen. Deletion 10%, 15%. They aren't looking at the computer, I said, feeling a surge of helpless rage. They are arresting the man, but they are letting the evidence burn. I stared at the red bar, counting down the seconds that could determine whether my brother-in-law went to prison or walked free on a technicality. 50 seconds left. Come on, I hissed. Turn it off. The red progress bar on the monitor hit 100%. The screen flashed a violent warning crimson. And then the connection to the laptop in the parking lot severed abruptly. The feed from the honeypot went dead. For a heartbeat. The war room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the cooling fans and the ragged breathing of Elias in the corner. He did it, Elias whispered, looking at the blank monitor. He wiped the drive. If the mirror was corrupted during the right sequence, we might have lost the chain of custody. I looked at Sarah. She was not panicking. She was typing 2 commands into her terminal, her face illuminated by the cool blue glow of the code. She hit enter with a decisive heavy stroke. On the main wall screen, a new window popped up. It was a pristine uncorrupted video file. Next to it was a perfectly preserved log of the entire session, timestamped down to the millisecond. He wiped the sandbox, Sarah said, leaning back in her chair with a smile that was sharp enough to cut glass. I virtualized his entire root directory the moment he logged in. He just spent the last 60 seconds deleting a hologram. The real evidence is sitting on our secure server. Lock, encrypt it, and backed up to 3 different continents. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The tension in my chest uncoiled, replaced by a sensation of absolute granite-heavy power. He thinks he destroyed it, I said softly. He thinks he won. I grabbed my radio. Marcus. Secure the suspect. Do not hand him over to the police just yet. I want you to bring him inside. Escort him to the main conference room. And Marcus, be polite. Let him believe he still has cards to play. Copy that. Director. Marcus replied. We have him. He is vocal. But he is coming. I turned to my team. Reset the board. Clear the red lights. I want the lobby to look like a normal business morning. Open the main doors. Let the sun in. I checked my watch. It was 3:15 in the morning. The sky outside was just beginning to turn the color of a bruised plum. The first hint of dawn bleeding into the night. I left the secure zone and walked to the main conference room, the fishbowl with the glass walls that faced the atrium. I stood at the head of the table alone. I didn't sit. I waited. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. Brent walked in, flanked by 2 of my largest security officers. He looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck. His shirt was torn at the collar. His hair was standing up in wild tufts, and his knuckles were scraped. But his eyes were alike with a frantic, desperate triumph. He shook off Marcus's hand and stepped into the room. He looked at me and then he laughed. It was a jagged, ugly sound. "You were too slow, Addison," he rasped, wiping sweat from his forehead. I saw the error code. I saw the deletion confirmation. It's gone. The laptop is a brick. You have nothing. He slumped into a chair, throwing his arms out. "So, here is how this is going to work. You are going to call off your dogs. You are going to transfer $50,000 to my account by noon to cover my legal stress. And in exchange, I won't tell the press that your system is so vulnerable a gambling addict could crack it in 10 minutes. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, thinking he was on a podium. Before I could answer, the elevator dinged again. Marjorie Perry stormed out. She must have been waiting in the car. Or perhaps Brent had texted her the moment he thought he was in the clear. She rushed into the room, her eyes darting between me and Brent when she saw Brent smiling. Her posture relaxed. She assumed he had won. She assumed the threat had worked. "Addison," she cried, rushing to Brent's side and placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "Thank God. Brent told me everything. He told me he had to conduct a security audit to show you how serious this is. Are we done? Can we stop this madness?" She looked at me, summoning her signature look of disappointed matriarchal authority. "You have pushed this family too far, Addison. Arresting your brother-in-law, calling the police. It is hysterical behavior. Now apologize to Brent. Write him a check for his trouble and let us go home. Sloan is sick with worry." I looked at them both. The thief and the enabler. They were a perfect toxic ecosystem. "Sit down, Mother," I said. "I will not sit down," I repeated. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of the entire building. "Or I will have you removed for trespassing again. And this time the press will be here to film it." Marjorie sat. She smoothed her skirt, looking indignant, but wary. I picked up a remote control from the table. "You want to talk about the security audit?" I said to Brent. "You want to talk about my vulnerability? You think you wiped the evidence?" "I know I did." Brent sneered. "I saw the sector overwrite. You can't recover data from a formatted drive." "You are right," I said. "You cannot recover data from a formatted drive." I pressed the button on the remote. The massive screen behind me, a wall of pure 8K resolution, flickered to life. "But you can recover it from the server that was recording your every keystroke." The video started playing. It wasn't the security camera footage. It was a screen recording of Brent's own laptop screen. We watched in high definition as the mouse cursor navigated to the honeypot folder. We watched as he selected the file named Investor Pitch Deck Q3. We watched the download bar creep across the screen. Brent's face went pale. The smirk vanished, replaced by the hollow look of a man watching his own execution. "That's fake," he stammered. "You generated that." "Did I generate this, too?" I asked. I clicked the remote. The screen split. On the left was the screen recording. On the right was the high-angle security footage from the parking lot. It showed Brent in the convertible, the blue light of the screen illuminating his face, the timestamp matching the download perfectly. And this I clicked again. The screen changed to display the invoice. The original SIN transaction $9,540. Passenger manifest. Jessica Tate. Todd Tate. You stole $9,540 from me to fly strangers to Hawaii, I said. My voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. That is credit card fraud. That is a felony. I clicked again. The screen displayed the logs from the honeypot. File accessed. Fair engine source. 4. Status stolen. You attempted to steal trade secrets valued at over $10 million. I continued. That is industrial espionage. That is a federal crime. Brent was shaking now. He looked at Marjorie. Marjorie. Tell her. Tell her she can't do this. We are family. Marjorie stood up. Her face flushed. Addison. Stop this. Turn that screen off. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. He was just borrowing the file. He wasn't going to sell it. He is your family. Family? I asked. I walked to the table and picked up the last piece of paper, the one Veronica had prepared. Let's talk about how family treats family. I held up the document. It was the loan agreement Brent had forged. I sent this document to a handwriting analysis expert an hour ago, I said, along with 10 samples of my actual signature from company checks. I put the document under the document camera on the table, projecting it onto the giant screen. Red lines appeared over the signature, highlighting the discrepancies. The expert confirmed it. I said, this signature is a forgery. You created a fake legal document to entrap me. Brent. You planned to use this to claim I owed you money, or that I had forgiven your debts. You didn't just steal from me tonight. You have been planning to defraud me for 2 years. The room went deadly silent. Brent looked at the screen. He saw the red lines dissecting his lie. He knew there was no talking his way out of this. The security audit excuse was dead. The borrowing excuse was dead. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. You bitch, he screamed, lunging toward the end of the table. You set me up. You left that folder there for me to find. This is entrapment. I will kill you. Brent. No. Marjorie shrieked. He didn't get 2 steps. I didn't flinch. I just looked toward the glass doors. Now, I said. The doors burst open, but it wasn't my security team. 4 officers from the Charleston Police Department and 2 agents and windbreakers labeled FBI. Cybercrimes marched into the room. They had been waiting in the adjacent office, watching the entire presentation through the glass. Brent Maddox. The lead agent announced, his voice booming. Place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. White fraud. An aggravated identity theft. Brent froze. He looked at the agents. He looked at me. No. He whimpered. No. Please. We can work this out. Addison. Tell them. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. The agents didn't wait for him to finish bargaining. They spun him around. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the acoustic perfection of the room. Click, click, click. You have the right to remain silent. The agent began reciting. Brent was thrashing. Crying now. Ugly sobs that shook his whole body. Marjorie. Do something. Don't let them take me. I'm the father of your grandchild. Marjorie lunged at me, grabbing my arm. Her fingernails dug into the fabric of my gray coat. Addison. She screamed. Her face contorted with rage and panic. Stop them. You can't let them take him. Think about Sloan. Think about the baby. You are destroying this family. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off. I am not destroying the family. Mom, I said. I am saving it from a parasite. You are cold. She spat, backing away, looking at me with pure hatred. You are a monster. How can you stand there and watch him be dragged away? Where is your heart? We are your blood. The agents were dragging Brent toward the elevator. He was still screaming my name, begging, bargaining, threatening. I watched him go. I felt nothing but a profound sense of quiet. The noise was leaving the building. I turned back to Marjorie. She was trembling, standing alone in the middle of the room, surrounded by the high-tech evidence of her son-in-law's crimes. You asked where my heart is, I said softly. I stepped closer to her. You taught me where it belongs. Marjorie. You taught me right there in the terminal. Marjorie stared at me, her eyes wide, tears streaking her expensive foundation. What? She whispered. You said flights are $1,450 each. If you cannot afford it, stay behind. I gestured to the door where Brent had just exited in handcuffs. Brent couldn't afford the price of admission to my life. I said, so he is staying behind. Marjorie gasped. She looked at me as if I had slapped her. She opened her mouth to speak, to curse me, to guilt me. But no words came out. She realized finally that the currency she had always used, guilt, had no value here. Go to Sloan, I said. She is going to need a mother. A real one. Not a manager. Marjorie let out a sob, turned on her heel, and ran out of the room, chasing after the police and the wreckage of her illusions. I stood alone in the conference room. Director. I turned. Marcus was standing by the door. The police have cleared the lobby. The suspect is in custody. Do you need a moment? No. Marcus. I said. I have had 30 years of moments. I walked over to the table and closed the laptop. I picked up the black binder in the red folder. Open the floor. I said. It is 6 a.m. The morning shift is arriving. We have clients to serve. I walked out of the conference room and into the atrium. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the massive glass skylights, illuminating the North Glass logo. My employees were starting to filter in, scanning their badges, grabbing coffee, talking about their weekends. They didn't know about the drama in the parking lot. They didn't know about the cyber attack. They just knew that the system was running, the lights were on, and their paychecks would clear. I walked to the center of the lobby and looked up at the digital map of the world. Thousands of planes were in the air. Moving people. Moving dreams. Moving commerce. I had built this me. The girl in the gray coat. The girl with the scuffed sneakers. I looked down at my shoes. They were old. They were comfortable. And they were standing on my own floor. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. I wasn't the baggage handler anymore. I wasn't the ATM. I wasn't the disappointment. I turned away from the door where my family had left and I walked toward the elevators, ready to start the day. This time, no one was going to swipe a card in my name. This time, I was flying the plane.